maybe the better values on cards like tonight going to be in some of those under-the-radar types of conferences. And that's why we talk about a lot of those here on the segments with Kyle and why we're going to do that here once again. So our second guest and last guest for this Monday edition of Bang the Book Radio is Kyle Hunter from HunterSportsPicks.com and also regular contributor to BangTheBook.com. Kyle, how's it going today, man?
It's going all right, man. It's a lot colder outside than I'd like it to be, though.
Dude, it's brutal. It's so I hate winter. I know college basketball's going on and the Super Bowl and all that, but dude, I hate winter.
Man, I like a little bit of snow, but I don't like this 10 degrees below zero. I can't handle that very well.
All right, well, we'll warm things up here with some college basketball chatter on today's show. And I guess, ironically enough, we'll go out to a conference where it's pretty much cold all season long for college basketball and start with the Big Sky. We told you we were going to talk about this on Friday, so we'll do it here on this show. And, very under-the-radar conference, but as you mentioned on Friday, this is a conference that you have had a lot of success with.
Yeah, I think the Big Sky and the Big West are a couple of my most successful conferences, especially with totals betting. To me, the Big Sky is certainly a weak conference overall, and when they get in the big dance, they haven't had much success at all. These teams are usually overmatched, but it's, that doesn't make it a conference that there's not value. In general, it makes it a conference that's even more value because it's more under the radar. Montana's the best team in this conference. If you look at this conference, if Montana's not the team that makes the big dance, then it would surprise me. However, as you know, you get in these conference tournaments, you never know what will happen. They're the best team, but that doesn't necessarily mean they'll win it. I think that when you look at the Big Sky, you get Montana, Weber State, Northern Colorado, and then there's a pretty big drop-off from there on. I tried to look at what kind of trends there have been in the Big Sky as far as size. Underdogs are 598 and 584 since 2005, so nothing too big there. Road teams are 601 and 577. Obviously, those don't match exactly because there's quite a few pushes there also for the dogs and the road teams. But underdogs have 8.5 points or more, 54% ATS since 2005. So I think that's because there's quite a bit of randomness in the Big Sky Conference, and even the better teams are upset more often than you would think they would be. The biggest thing that I wanted to point out, though, as far as the Big Sky, if you've been betting overs in the Big Sky, you've made a lot of money in the last 10 or 12 years. 654, 528, 55.3% overs. If you take just totals of 145 or lower, 57.3% over since 2005. This angle has done really well in general, and it's done the best at the end of the season. So keep that in mind as we go later in the season here this year. Nobody plays defense in the Big Sky, almost nobody. And the teams that do play some defense here are almost always the teams that are the best teams in this conference because, they're kind of the rare bird. It's one of those conferences where, you get a lot of sloppy games where there's quite a bit of scoring because, there's turnovers and back and forth, easy points. So I think that's something to remember when you're handicapping the Big Sky. We haven't seen any real big angles one way or the other toward the side, but overs have been really good.
So as we sort of put together a hierarchy here for the Big Sky, you mentioned Montana being the top team here in this conference, Weber State, Northern Colorado, the next two, and I believe Northern Colorado, maybe last year or 2 years ago, wasn't even eligible for the conference tournament, I believe because of some sort of infraction, something like that. But after Montana, Weber State, Northern Colorado, how do you sort of rank the rest of the Big Sky?
Yeah, I've got Montana State after that. Tyler Hall, you could make an argument that he's the best player in this conference, certainly one of the best. He can fill it up, get really hot from three-point range at any point. He's shooting 38% from three-point range so far this year, but if you've gotten to see any of the Big Sky games, and I try to watch them whenever I can, certainly not on TV, but this is a conference where if you can catch any of those games, by replay or ESPN3 or ESPN Plus, it is interesting to try to find out something about these teams. Tyler Hall takes a lot of really tough shots. Everybody knows he's the go-to guy. 38% from three-point range is pretty good when you're taking as many tough shots as he is. I think this Montana State team is certainly capable of pulling big upsets because they're so efficient on offense and they have a star there in Tyler Hall. The next one that I would say, Southern Utah. This team used to be a bottom feeder. They're certainly not the bottom feeder that they used to be in this conference. They get to the free throw line a lot. They get a lot of points from the free throw line. So if you see them matched up against a team that is not able to defend without fouling, Southern Utah, a good look to back them or play overs in that case because they can really get to the line a lot, very aggressive on offense. To me, the rest of these teams, it'd be pretty easy to mix and match these teams. But I have Idaho State next, and then Eastern Washington. Idaho State's a really inconsistent team. Eastern Washington playing better here of late, and Eastern Washington has pulled quite a few upsets in the past. I think they have an underrated home court advantage there. Portland State after that. Portland State used to be very good last year. A lot different team this year, not nearly as good. Sacramento State after that. Sacramento State plays a little bit better defense than most of the other teams in this conference, and that'll keep them in a lot of games. They've not been able to win too many of them so far, though. I think they are better than they were last year. Northern Arizona after that. This is a team that's been pretty bad for many years now. I don't think that they're as bad as they have been in the past, so if they're catching a bunch of points, can get some value on Northern Arizona. And then Idaho. Idaho was a big drop-off here in the past year or so. They've lost a lot of really good players in the last couple of years. Idaho used to have, a lot of their big-time scorers, Victor Sanders, Perrion Calendray. Those guys are gone, and Idaho's dropped off in a big way. Last year, they were 126 in Ken Palm's rankings. So far this year, 334. So huge difference there. I think, though, these last few teams in the Big Sky, the bottom of this conference is pretty weak.
Now, in terms of looking at this conference as a whole here, and we'll talk about some scheduling spots and things of that sort here in a second, what about this conference from a tempo standpoint? Do a lot of teams like to get up and down the floor? Do we get a lot of pace wars here?
I would say there's a decent amount of pace wars in this conference. Portland State is trying to press, force the issue a lot, so they're always going to be trying to play fast. Southern Utah plays pretty fast. Like I said, they get to the line a lot, so there's a lot of possessions in their games. Weber State's changed the way they've played this year. Been able to make a little bit of money on Weber State so far this year based on the fact that they decided to play fast. I know that there were a lot of notes from Randy Ray in the postseason last year and then before this year that he wanted to change the way they play because he felt like his team was kind of becoming a dinosaur, that everybody was evolving and they weren't doing it. So they've decided to play faster this year. It's worked pretty well for them. I mean, they're certainly a very good team in this conference. Montana can play however they want to play. You can look at them on a given game, and they can have a really high-scoring game. The next game that might be very low. I think Montana's a hard team to bet totals with because, you don't really know if they're going to play up-tempo or if they're going to slow it down and win with their defense. So, to me, even though they're the best team in this conference, they're one of the hardest ones to figure out from a total standpoint. You got a team like Idaho trying to slow the game down a lot, but they play really weak defense. Northern Arizona the same way. They slow it down quite a bit, but they can't play any defense. That conference is so interesting when it comes to betting totals is you have several teams that try to slow the game down, but they're so bad at defense, they're going to give up a lot of points anyways. And then once you're behind, you can't stall anymore once you're behind by 15 points. So some of the weakest teams in this conference like to slow the game down, but they really can't do it for too long because they're usually losing because of their defense. And like I said before, I think some of the best betting angles in this conference are looking for low overs. You get a game between two teams that aren't very good in this conference. That's a good look to the over if you get one of those 140s or something like that in the Big Sky. Those have done really well in the past. I would look for those to continue to do well. I think this is an angle where people are starting to figure it out a little bit. has been money starting to come in on these low Big Sky overs. I think that, some people out there are starting to realize that these Big Sky games, you can't hang a 138 on these games very often at all. It's, there's going to be too much value to the over. I think that you're almost always going to see over money on games in the Big Sky. So if you like the over in the Big Sky, which certainly that's my lean, you want to play it earlier rather than later.
Yeah, as you mentioned, totals 145 or lower, 57.3% to the over since 2005. So, again, that has been a very profitable angle, as Kyle just mentioned. How about some scheduling spots here? I mean, this conference is a little bit spread out. I mean, you've got, you got Northern Colorado, you've got Southern Utah, Northern Arizona is pretty far out there, Sacramento State, Portland State, pretty far out there. So there can be some travel and elevation situations here.
Yeah, I think this one is maybe not quite as easy to find scheduling spots as what we talked about the other day. Most of these teams play at high elevation, so you could say that it's minimized a little bit because most of these teams are used to it. I do think that Northern Colorado can catch teams in some bad spots sometimes. Pretty high elevation there in Northern Colorado, Greeley, Colorado. This is a team, too, in Northern Colorado that it has not really been noticed yet by most people. I think they're better than most people realize. They're 11-7 so far this year. They went 26-12 last year after going 11-8-18 the year before, 10-21 the year before. So I think that, in the Big Sky, you're going to catch a team like Northern Colorado that may still have a little bit more value than most people would realize because, it is the Big Sky and it is Northern Colorado. Most people aren't paying attention to them. Other than us and talking about it on Bang the Book, almost nobody's going to talk about games like this or teams like this. So I think Northern Colorado can catch some teams in bad spots. I think Montana State can definitely get teams in bad spots as well, either right before or right after the showdown with Montana. Usually teams will take a road trip to Montana and Montana State back-to-back. And, Montana's the top dog in this conference at this point. We talked about it the other day in the Sun Belt. When it came to Georgia State. After you play Georgia State, the game after that, teams have done really poorly ATS. Now, I looked this up to see how teams have done right after they played Montana, and this one's a little bit tricky because Montana hasn't exactly dominated it for years. For a while, Weber State was always the best team in this conference, but Montana, if you go back since 2005, a team after playing Montana has hit 47% ATS, so going against them, you're just fading the team. You've got 53%. In the past couple of years, it's been a little bit better than that, though. And I think that moving forward, a team like Montana being the best team in the conference, looking to go against a team that just had a big game against them in the next game, I think makes some sense. And I think that a lot of times in Montana State, like I said, will catch teams in these bad spots because, they're either looking forward to the Montana game instead of looking at this Montana State game, or they just had a big showdown with Montana. Maybe they played a really hard-fought game but came up a little bit short. I think they can certainly catch a team in bad spots. And I'll say one more. Portland State's not very close to a lot of these other teams, so I think the long road trip to Portland State, certainly not the team that they were last year, but still a team that can turn you over, get a lot of offensive rebounds, play a unique style. They've only won one game in the conference so far this year, but I certainly think that they'll win some more games. They've played, quite a bit on the road here of late. They played some home games coming up. I would think that Portland State, can catch some teams in some tricky spots as well. You think of a Southern Utah to Portland State or something like that. Certainly not a short road trip.
Now, we mentioned with the Sun Belt that we talked about, you got a lot of that Thursday, Saturday scheduling. Is that how the Big Sky is set up with the Thursday, Saturday turnaround?
Yes, usually. And this is one of those where, you can get those Thursday night games and then Saturday afternoon games. So even less than 48 hours in some of these cases. So especially when you've got the long road trip, back-to-back road games pretty far away. If you're playing Southern Utah and then you're playing Eastern Washington, or if you're playing Eastern Washington and then you're playing Portland State, that's usually the pretty common double is Eastern Washington, Portland State, Sacramento State, Portland State, something like that. if you're quite a ways away from home and then you have a quick turnaround less than 48 hours, you got to be careful backing that team in that second game, especially depending on how the first one goes. But, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty quick turnaround for college kids, and that's certainly the normal here for the Big Sky.
All right, so let's move away from the Big Sky. I think we did a good job breaking that down. It'll be a conference that we continue to watch throughout the rest of the season here. Let's get into our regression candidates, and interestingly enough, both of them come from Conference USA here. Let's start with the negative regression candidate that's on your radar.
Yeah, I didn't do that on purpose, but it is kind of interesting. They both come from the same conference. First of all, UAB's defense. If you look at UAB's defense, they look like they're pretty good, but then you realize who they've been playing against. According to Ken Pomeroy, they've faced the 339th toughest schedule of offenses so far this year. So they've faced a ton of weak offenses. They're 80th in effective field goal percentage. They were 161st a year ago. I think this UAB defense is quite a bit worse than it looks like on paper. If you look down the schedule to see who UAB is going to be playing going forward, they don't really have tremendous offenses that they're going to be playing against too many times. North Texas is a good team in general. Rice is a pretty decent offense. Marshall's certainly a good offense. And Western Kentucky, decent on offense. They should be better than they are. They're underachieving. So I think that UAB, the biggest thing I would look for is to go against them when they face those better offenses or take overs. I will note that UAB does play very slowly. They can have some pretty low-scoring games, but if you get one of those really low totals with a UAB game, I would look to bet an over based on the fact that their defense should start regressing to the mean when they start playing a decent offense.
Well, and another thing that we've talked about here, because they move at such a slow tempo and they do have what appears to be a good defense, some of their totals in those games where they face better offenses will open low. And we've seen a lot of steam and a lot of money come in on overs for low totals. So start looking to circle some of these spots and play the overnights on them. Maybe you get a little bit of a middle opportunity as well.
Absolutely. You see a total come out, we'll say for a game against like Old Dominion or Charlotte or something like that. You see a total come out at 121, 122. You know what's going to happen, and it's going to get bet up. So, if you want to take the over, you better be ready for it because, that 121 or 122 is going to become 125 or 125 and a half. And I shouldn't have to tell you how many times it could fall between 121 and 125 and a half.
All right, so a positive regression candidate here. And this is a team that I kind of isolated a couple of weeks ago, and I think I was on the train a little bit too early with them. But this is a team that played a brutal non-conference schedule in a season where they had a lot of transition and turnover.
Yeah, Middle Tennessee State, I think you're right on Middle Tennessee State. I mean, if you go back to thinking about it, they choked a couple games away in really bad form there against FIU at home, Florida Atlantic at home. Really should have won both of those games. This Middle Tennessee State team finally figured out how to finish off their wins here against UTSA and UTEP. To me, this MTSU team is certainly better than they look like they are. They're 5-14 so far this year. They haven't been covering the number. They turn it over too much, but this team's better on offense than it looks like. They faced the 22nd ranked toughest schedule of defenses so far this year. They've certainly shot the ball better here in their last couple games, picked up a couple very needed wins. I'll look to be watching for overs or chances to back them. Middle Tennessee State's going to have some fairly low total games. And if you look at the tempo they're playing right now, they've actually been playing fairly quickly. Like I said, the weakness of them is they turn the ball over so much that it can, hurt their efficiency pretty badly. So you want to pay attention to who they're playing against. Are they really good at forcing turnovers? And maybe MTSU is not going to get too many points because turnovers are a big issue. Almost 25% of their offensive possessions end in a turnover, and that's certainly very bad. But they've done a little bit better in the conference here of late. This is a young team, a good coach. McDevitt has shown himself to be a good coach at UNC Asheville. I assume he'll do fine with this team as long as he can recruit well. But, this MTSU team was set up to fail this year. They lost so many people, played a really tough schedule, they're not going to play that many great teams down the stretch here. And I think that NCSU, I'll look to bet overs more than I would back them, but I think that you could find some value backing them as well.
All right, so we'll get into our follow and fade segment here. Excuse me. And, we're talking about we talk about a low major with the Big Sky, something of a mid-major with Conference USA. We're going to go real deep under the radar for the follow and fade here, beginning with the follow team out in the Big West.
Yeah, UC Davis. To me, UC Davis is an experienced team, a team that hasn't done well ATS so far this year, 5-11 ATS so far this season. They've played a lot tougher schedule than the average Big West team. If you look at most of these Big West teams, they've played some really bad schedules so far this year. You'll find 300 schedule faced, things like that. UC Davis has faced the 58 toughest schedules, and their offense looks really bad. And I'm not saying that their offense is good. You look at them, they're 302nd in offensive efficiency in the country, but they have faced the 30th toughest slate of defenses so far this year. So they've been up against some very good defenses. They've played against San Francisco, who's a very high-quality team this year, Indiana, Arizona, USC, teams like that. Certainly much better defenses than what they're going to see the rest of the season in the Big West. I would think that overs might have some value with UC Davis as well, because if you look at their tempo, this is something that I track pretty closely. What does the team play like as far as tempo outside of the conference, and then what do they do once they get in the conference? UC Davis was playing pretty slowly outside the conference. They get in the conference now. They've been the fastest-paced team on offense of any team in this conference so far in only conference play. So when you see those really low-totaled games in UC Davis games, I would look toward the over as well.
Well, and something that's very important to point out here, we cite a lot of Ken Pomeroy, and in my videos over on our Bang the Book YouTube page, I like to use Bart Torvik quite a bit as well, because I think that, there is a lot of saturation in the college basketball market when it comes to Ken Pom. But keep in mind that the adjusted offensive and defensive efficiencies are based on how a team would do against an average Division I defense. And I don't know if that's something that a lot of people realize with those Ken Pom numbers. When you're breaking down the matchups and things of that sort, sometimes these teams aren't average offenses or defenses. So, that's where you kind of find that value in the Ken Pom numbers.
Right, and I like Bart Torvik as well. Another good one is Haslametrics. If you look at UC Davis, they're going to be playing against a lot of defenses that aren't as good as average. The Big West is not a good conference. They're not known for defense either. If you play defense in the Big West, you have a decent chance to win. That's why UC Irvine's been so well and done so well in this conference, is because they play good defense. So certainly, UC Davis is going to play against a lot of weak defenses. I think their offense is going to be improving going forward. If you look at their schedule too, they're about to play a 4-game road trip here: Hawaii, UC Riverside, Cal Poly, UC Santa Barbara, and then they play a couple home games. They finish off the season with a 4-game homestand. I think UC Davis will be a good bet on team from here forward.
All right, so we'll go really under the radar here for this one, a team that you're looking to fade a little bit. And we talk about these fade and follows as long-term, short-term, medium-term. What do you think here about the Hofstra Pride?
Yeah, Hofstra's been really good. They've won a bunch of games in a row at this point. I guess 14-game winning streak, I believe. Hofstra just been extremely good this season. They shoot 80.8% from the free throw line. That is amazing for a college team. I mean, it's about 1% better than anybody else in the country. You shoot 80.8% from the free throw line, that's going to win you quite a few games. The other team shooting 65%, you shooting 80%. Big difference there. Hofstra, they've changed the way they play a little bit this year, and it's really worked out. If you look at Hofstra in past seasons, they've been really weak on defense. So they decided to switch up to a zone defense quite a bit this year. It's slowed the opponent down. It's helped them quite a bit. They're number 1 in defense in the conference so far this year. People aren't used to seeing this zone that Hofstra is playing. It's worked out very well. I will say that I think Hofstra is a good team. So this is a short-term fade. You think about who they just beat, though, in the last couple games. Hofstra beat UNC Wilmington 87-72 at home. I was reading from some press clippings before that game. Hofstra just flat out, everybody on the team said, we're looking for revenge. I know we're not supposed to say that. That's what it is. We want revenge on this UNC Wilmington team. They knocked us out of the CAA tournament last year in what was an upset. They had just beaten them also by 20 points just a couple weeks before that. So they lost twice to a weaker UNC Wilmington team last year. They get their revenge. The game after that, they played College of Charleston. Charleston was the preseason favorite in the CAA. They beat them 86-72. Now they go and play a 3-game road trip, James Madison, Towson, and Northeastern. Now, Northeastern, a good team in this conference. You would think they'd be up for a game like that. But James Madison and Towson, I think, are dangerous spots for them. They'll be laying, double digits or almost double digits in games like that. And you would think that Hofstra has to have some letdown spots here coming up.
Yeah, and as you mentioned here in your notes, Hofstra 15-4 against the spread. So, a team that, look, no matter how far under the radar a team is, if they have that kind of ATS record, the books are going to adjust. They are going to make you pay a little bit of a premium on that team. And, of course, maybe we do see it here in those 2 upcoming road games against subpar competition. All right, let's talk a couple of big conference games here and a couple of mid-major games to wrap up this first of 2 segments on handicapping the hardwood for this week. Texas Tech and Kansas State as we go to the Big 12. Obviously, we know that there's a lot of home court advantage here in this conference, and Manhattan is a pretty tough place to play.
Yeah, it certainly is. Texas Tech, to me, they've lost 2 straight games. Tech has an excellent defense. We've talked about this before, and Chris Beard's a really good coach, tremendous coach. But their worst offensive efficiency team in the Big 12 so far this year. Texas Tech is going to have to be a little bit better on offense if they're going to be good enough to beat some of these best teams in the conference. They lost at home to Iowa State. They lost on the road to Baylor. This is a key game for them. They certainly don't want a 3-game losing streak. And then they go play Arkansas in a 9-game on Saturday. So they have that weird spot where I think the Big 12 and SEC play quite a few games against each other this coming weekend in that challenge. But, Texas Tech, certainly a good defense. Their offense is weaker than they were last year. They served Evans quite a bit. Kansas State's a much better team with Dean Wade. And Kansas State's really good on defense also. You got the 5th best efficiency on defense for Kansas State, according to KenPom, number 1 for Texas Tech. This is going to be a really low-total game, a very, very low total. Maybe 120. Could we see a total open at 119 or something here? Certainly, it wouldn't surprise me. If it does open 118 or 119, it'll get that up. So, if you like the under, wait for it to go up. To me, this is an interesting game to find out about both of these teams going forward. Kansas State's 14-4. They've certainly played much better in the last couple games. Nice road win against Oklahoma. Good home win against TCU. Big game for both teams. I feel like both of these teams pride themselves on defense, not giving second chance opportunities, things like that. And, both of these teams are a little bit questionable on offense. Kansas State's been really weak on offense so far this year. I would expect that their numbers would get better as long as Dean Wade is healthy. So if he's playing, they'll be better on offense than they have been. I would say I'd be a little bit cautious about taking an under with 119 or 120 in a game like this because, it doesn't take much in a game like this to get over 119 or 120. And both teams foul quite a bit. Certainly not a good thing if you have a really low total.
When you look at Texas Tech here, and again, this is why I pointed out, that adjusted defensive efficiency based on playing a, average Division I team, Texas Tech on the year, their non-conference schedule was 339th in the country for strength of schedule, according to KenPom. So now that they're into Big 12 play, you mentioned the loss at home to Iowa State, the loss to Baylor. We're kind of seeing what happens when they step up in class a little bit.
Agreed. I don't like to go against Texas Tech because Chris Beard's a tremendous coach, but Texas Tech is not extremely talented this year. Not that they're a bad team, but they really only have one go-to guy in Jarrett Culver. Other than him, nobody else can just get their own basket very often. Like I said, they certainly missed Keenan Evans. Kansas State, probably the better team, to be totally honest with you, in the long term, as far as potentially making a run. If Kansas State can stay healthy, I think they have a better chance of making a deep run in the tournament because they're probably going to end up being more balanced. Wade's been really good offensively for this team, and they certainly miss them a lot.
All right, so one of the things that we do here with these games is sometimes we'll give a little bit of a look at a potential premium play here. That's what you're thinking about in the MAC between Bowling Green and Eastern Michigan.
Yeah, I like this spot here for Eastern Michigan quite a bit. Ken Palm has this projected at Eastern Michigan to win by 1. I hope I can get a -1 here on Eastern Michigan. I'm not sure that'll happen. Eastern Michigan's played quite a bit better here of late. They didn't lose by too much to Buffalo, and Buffalo is the dominant team in this conference. They beat Ball State on the road. They beat Kent State badly at home. Then they lost by 2 at Akron. Not a bad showing. Akron's a pretty quality team for the MAC here. Bowling Green, to me, they're not as good as they look like they are. I mean, they're certainly an improved team. They're 13-5. They've won, 7 or 8 games in a row here. You've got a Bowling Green team that last year beat Eastern Michigan in overtime twice. Eastern Michigan remembers that. It's losing to a team twice makes a mark on you in and of itself. You lose in overtime twice, that's going to bother you quite a bit. Eastern Michigan has played the 6th toughest country so far this year. That's a tremendous schedule and tougher than anybody else in the MAC. Bowling Green's played the 287th toughest schedule. So you look at their stats, if you're just looking on, team rankings or covers or something like that, you look at the stats of these two teams, I don't think you're really getting what the teams actually are, because Bowling Green has played so much of a weaker schedule than Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan plays that matchup zone of Syracuse's, and I think that this is a good spot for Eastern Michigan to knock off a Bowling Green team that's riding high coming into this game. Eastern Michigan has to be motivated for this game. How could you not be? And, perception is pretty high on Bowling Green right now. So this is one of those games where I think that Eastern Michigan has a motivational edge, and I think they match up well with them anyways. The other thing I would say about this game, Eastern Michigan's going to get money here. Adam has said this before, and he's totally right. I keep an eye on things like this as well. You look at strength of schedule differentiations. Those teams are going to catch money right away. The teams that have played the much tougher schedule, this is about as big a difference as you ever see. So if you like Eastern Michigan here, you're going to want to play it early.
All right, let's look out ahead to Thursday here, and we'll go back to Conference USA. We touched on Middle Tennessee and UAB a little bit earlier in the show. Now we're going to tackle Marshall and Louisiana Tech, and this is a very interesting spot for one of these two teams.
Yeah, this one's going to be in the situational spots article that I'll write up here later this afternoon, and that'll be on BangTheBook.com. You can check that out every week. Marshall, really weird spot here. They played Thursday, January 17th against Florida Atlantic, and they played on Saturday. They play Monday night here against Western Kentucky on the road. Then they play Thursday again. So January 17th to January 24th, they're going to play 4 games. You almost never see something like that, and I don't think you should. It doesn't seem very fair to Marshall to be playing their 4th game. That's just a very, very tough spot for them. And Louisiana Tech is one of these teams that's not really good, but they're a decent team. They're 13-7. La Tech is not going to be playing as many games. This is their 3rd game since the 17th. So, it's not that they have just been sitting there not playing at all. But they've lost a couple straight games on the road. They come back home. They get a Marshall team that's coming off a big game against Western Kentucky. That's certainly a game that should be a close game, a hard-fought game, played at a really high tempo. I like this spot here for Louisiana Tech. It'd be hard not to like the spot for them. I think that Marshall comes into this game certainly worn out. They play very quickly, and they're playing their 4th game in a week, coming off a big game against Western Kentucky. So I'm curious to see what kind of line we get here. How much is La Tech going to be favored by? I assume they'll be favored, especially based on the spot. But, it's very strange to see a spot like this.
Yeah, and you look at that January 17th game, 82 possessions against Florida Atlantic, 88 possessions on Saturday against FIU. They're the fastest team in the country. Then Western Kentucky, then Louisiana Tech. And then Saturday, they're on the road in Hattiesburg to take on Southern Miss. So another bad spot there for Marshall on Saturday. So if they find a way to navigate this game, maybe you've got an opportunity to go against them there coming up on Saturday. One more game to look at here, this one from Thursday night, major conference game in the ACC. North Carolina State taking on Louisville. The Cardinals look pretty good with Chris Mack at the helm right now.
Yeah, I mean, we should have all known it before, but if you didn't know before, Chris Mack is a really good coach. He's doing a great job with this team. I think there were a lot of question marks about Louisville coming into this year. They're 13-5. They have the big road win at North Carolina. After that big road win at North Carolina, then they have what would be a difficult spot against Boston College. They take care of business and win 80-70, and then they just absolutely thumped Georgia Tech this past weekend. I was looking down through the scores there the other day, and I saw 69-31. Louisville was winning that game, and I think it was like 43-16 at halftime. Yeah, it was 43-16 at halftime. So, I mean, that was just a blowout on the road there against the Georgia Tech team that actually was shorthanded. And that's a note that I'll say. Keep an eye on Georgia Tech moving forward. If Jose Alvarado doesn't play, very important to their offense. Handles the ball, key assist guy. If he doesn't play, it hurts them a lot. He didn't play in that game. But back to Louisville, this is a Louisville team that has really impressed me quite a bit. Louisville's played a really tough schedule, the 14th toughest schedule in the country so far this year. NC State, look, they're 15-3, and I said this on my video the other day at Bang the Book. Keep an eye out for those videos at YouTube. I'll be doing a couple of those a week. But, I talked about North Carolina State. I don't know how good they are. I think we're going to find out going forward. I mean, they play Louisville, Clemson, Virginia Tech, North Carolina. We're going to find out pretty soon if North Carolina State is a real deal or not. They've played a really weak schedule this year. Their non-conference schedule was 350th toughest in the country. So just about the weakest non-conference schedule of any team in the country. 263rd overall strength of schedule. Markel Johnson's been out here for NC State. Definitely keep an eye on his status. Very important to this team. A good defender, good overall player on both ends, very good assist guy. He's very efficient with the ball, also a good defender, like I said. If he doesn't play, I think this is a spot to go against them and take Louisville. If he does play, then, it may be hard to lay too many points because, this could certainly be a close game. But I think going forward that NC State would either be a fade or stay away team for me. I think that NC State is a quality team, but they're not quite as good as most people think they are.
Kyle Hunter, professional handicapper over at huntersportspicks.com and also doing that daily piece for us at bangthebook.com. What's going on over at your website right now, man?
Yeah, lowered prices on the college basketball season pass. You can go check that out at huntersportspicks.com. All my premium selections over there. And sign up for the free picks newsletter if you haven't already. As I mentioned last week, I'll be doing some contests for cash prizes, things like that going forward, whether it be free premium picks or cash prizes. I like to do some contests, and I'll do a big dance NCAA tournament contest as well. And then check out all my work at Bang the Book as well. We got the CBB daily article and going along well. I will note, I wanted to say that, I'll be looking for some of those live spots to put in the articles. Those won't be tracked on the record because I want to be fully transparent and say that, nobody is going to be able to know perfectly what the live line could be ahead of time. And I don't want to look like I'm padding my record or anything in any way. And, bangthebook.com, that way, as far as honesty and transparency, and that's always been really key to me. So, I'll put spots in there, but that won't go on the record. It'll just be the ones, pregame bets that go on that record. But I do think that there are going to be some spots where we can look for some live plays. And then also check out all the videos as well for Bang the Book there on YouTube.
Well, you can follow Kyle on Twitter at Kyle Hunter Picks. Kyle, appreciate the time as always, man. Thank you so much for joining me. Talk to you again later in the week.
All right, sounds good.